Hi, gang. It's Patrick from Gays Do the D.
And Vincent from Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Podcast.
We are here with our first ever crossover episode of Magic and Monsters, where we are exploring the wonderful world of creature features.
And, just some of the darker films to come out of the House of Mouse. The ones that make you say, wait. That's a Disney movie?
For today's episode, we are dipping into the world of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So put on your Mickey ears.
Grab a snack. Away we go.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Vincent, what are we doing here? What's going on? What have we gotten ourselves into?
Well, we have started a new podcast, but it's not a new podcast.
Sure.
Yeah. Magic and Monsters. So
Woo.
We're here to join forces, Gaze Do the D, Camp Kaiju.
Love it.
We've partnered on previous episodes, respectively, on
True.
our own shows.
True story.
But here we are with one just totally new product.
A new situation, a thing that we're trying out here. Who's to know what it's going to look like? Behind the scenes, everybody, we don't even really have like a logo or a theme song yet. Like we're absolutely, all we know so far is the episode we want to start with. And that's what we're doing today. And we're editing it together and figuring out what this is. So feedback is so welcome after this episode. we will absolutely need it. But yeah, like Vincent said, we're throwing our two podcasts together, and they're making a baby podcast, and we're gonna try to feed it and see how it goes and grows.
Yeah, the plan right now is at least what's our release schedule? What are we talking about?
Quarterly?
Quarterly?
Mark? Yeah.
Yeah. This could be our summer episode.
There you
Maybe
go.
we have a holiday themed episode.
Ooh.
And then, or a Halloween themed episode.
It feels appropriate. I mean, if
It
we're doing
does.
monsters.
All right. So again, hey, listeners,
We have no idea.
chime in. But I'm thinking summer, spooky season,
Yeah.
holidays, and then one in the spring.
I like it. I like that we said Magic and Monsters officially. That's our title. We're going with it.
So.
It's
Yeah.
official. No backsies.
Perfect alliteration.
Wonderful.
What more do you want in a title?
Yeah. I mean, that's all. This is what we got, folks. This is what we have for you. Hopefully you love it. So, okay. Who are we? How do we know each other? What are our podcasts about? Because at this point now, we are releasing these episodes on both of our podcast listener bases, basically. So two different audiences are going to be listening to this and going, I know Vincent, I don't know Patrick. Or I know Patrick, I don't know Vincent. So Vincent, who are you and how do you know me?
My name is Vincent Hannum. I am a playwright, film lover, and all around, mostly theater artist. But Patrick and I know each other from our theater work. I've produced a play. He's directed that play. We've both been actors on the same stages. So we're just a couple of artists who respect what we do, and we are friends.
You sounded really hesitant about that. That last little bit. You're like, and we're friends, maybe.
Well, I was like, so many things. Fill in the blank. No,
Yeah.
this is going great. So my podcast is
Yes.
called Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Podcast. I'm the producer and co-host. My co-host is a novelist and film critic, Matthew Cole Levine. And together, he and I discuss a wide range of monster films. Your traditional kaiju, Godzilla, King Kong. Your more science fiction-based films, Space Invaders, creature features, and or Disney movies that feature some strange beasts. So I'm a huge nerd with this stuff. Love doing the research. Love talking about it. And yeah, I couldn't be happier to be doing this kind of work.
Agreed.
So who are you, Patrick?
Who am I?
How do you know me?
Anyway, I know you from the same way you know me. Through we met through theater. I'm Patrick Kazuki, by the way, of Gaze Do the D podcast. Also an actor, sometimes director, editor of the Gaze of the podcast, and a co-host. There are 4 of us. I am one of 4, and a founder of that podcast as well. Vincent and I met each other, as you said, through theater, and we've been buddies ever since, collaborating. I feel like we have very similar vibes, and that's why we get along pretty well together. Very well together. Not pretty well. We get along very well together. Yeah. We just have an admiration and respect for each other's work, and we have 2 very different podcasts, yet similar podcasts in some ways, in that Disney is a very sort of campy environment, as is Camp Kaiju, which is in the title of your podcast. Our podcast, as in the name, GDTD, Gaze Do the D, is a Disney podcast that talks about all things Disney, parks, movies, experiences. We have some former cast members come on the show for interviews every once in a while, all through just sort of a LGBTQIA plus lens. So we sort of lean into what makes Disney just a little bit gay. But it's for everybody. So even if you're not of that community, we welcome you into our podcast. Yeah. And we discovered that each other had a podcast and have since been on each other's podcasts. And I think we collaborate really well together. We just have a good respect for each other's likes and dislikes. And what I love about your podcast, Vincent, this might be going way too deep into the waters, but is that you two are come at it as such fanboys of this genre that you're specifically talking about, but you're not afraid to say that you don't like a movie, even if you're reviewing it. You're like, listen, we're reviewing it. It exists, but wasn't a fan. And so I like the honesty that you guys bring to it, and you are both nerds about it as well, which I am on the same side with Disney movies. So I think it's
well, that's what I was going to say. I love I'm attracted to people who love what they do. And you clearly have a passion for Disney. You're at Disney World seemingly every other week running a marathon. No. Patrick, what are you doing this weekend? You want to hang out? Oh, you're running another marathon. Got it. In Orlando.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Gotcha.
Behind you, listeners can't see this, is a wall of medals Patrick has from various Disney marathons or runs.
Runs, yeah. I've done a marathon, but half marathons, 10Ks, 5Ks.
Well, he's modest, everybody. But that's why we like him.
He's truthful. True story.
You got a good show going on. You've built
Thanks.
such a great listener base. Just the people I've met Patrick has invited me to a happy hour we did a couple weeks ago that you provide to your patrons.
Yeah.
And I got to just hang out with the Gaze Do the D Tweedles. Is that what you call?
We call them Tweedles.
Yeah, Tweedles. So just good people. And that's the thing about nerds too. And I'm going off a little bit, but monster movie lovers, I haven't met a bad apple. Like we just love what we love, and we love hanging out with each other. Mm-hmm. And I get the same vibe with all you Disney nuts.
It's true. This is why I'm excited about this podcast. Well, for many reasons, but the debate that happens between people who love something so passionately, and we love 2 different aspects of these movies that we're going to talk about so passionately. And so I'm excited about the debate and the discussion that is bound to happen, and hopefully the listener feedback as well. So in future episodes, this is normally where we would maybe insert some listener feedback here. Obviously, we have no listeners yet, but hopefully you're listening right now and you will respond to these podcasts and let us know what you think and whether or not you agree with us on our thoughts on the movies that we're going to talk about, and suggestions maybe for future podcasts as well.
Well, on that note, do we want to talk about some movies that we have thrown around as possible episodes?
I like that. Are we going to give them a peek behind the curtain already?
Yeah, I think this is one of the fun things we can do is just talk about titles.
Love it.
So I've already made a list on my Letterboxd at Camp Kaiju of magic and monster movies from the wonderful world of Disney. I have some obvious things: Lilo and Stitch, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Monsters Inc. Right?
Monsters is a good one. Yeah. And we're expanding too. So sometimes when you think about Disney, you think about just the cartoons, right? But Disney owns a lot of different companies. They own Searchlight now, and they own Touchstone, and they own the Marvel Universe and Star Wars and all that. So we're opening the box a little bit more than we normally would on Gaze to the D, which is really fun. So we're inviting a lot more. Like Arachnophobia came to mind for maybe an upcoming episode. So who knows what the sky's the limit on this. I'm excited for all these titles, though. Nightmare Before Christmas, I think I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think that I have some exciting, I don't know, just some wacky titles that were thrown out in that happy hour. What do we have? We have a TV movie called Mr. Boogedy.
Mr. Boogedy.
And its sequel, Bride of Boogedy.
Yep. 2 gems, just real gems from the wonderful world of Disney.
And from the 80s. 80s was a weird time.
Sure was.
There's a movie called Baby Secret of the Lost Legend about
the dinosaur one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm excited for you to see some of these movies for the first time as well, because they are wild, some of these movies.
Just bonkers. But there are a couple, in my own research, I did come across a couple of seemingly well-regarded horror movies.
Yeah.
Or like they lean more horror, and that would be Something Wicked This Way Comes.
I was just going to say, yeah, that one for sure.
And have you heard of The Watcher in the Woods?
Watcher in the Woods. I think, isn't Betty Davis in that movie? I'm pretty sure she is. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen that one. I don't know that it's necessarily a monster movie, so we should investigate that one a little bit further. But it is definitely like thriller kind of horror mystery.
Well, according to the Letterboxd synopsis, it says, after an American family moves to an old country manor in rural England, one of the daughters is tormented by the spirit of the owner's long-lost daughter, who mysteriously disappeared 30 years ago during a solar eclipse.
True. So it's a bit of a ghost story, for sure.
Which we welcome on Camp Kaiju.
Yes, that's right. All monsters are welcome there.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I wonder if Gaze to the D has also investigated Return to Oz, which might be an interesting one for us to relook at when it comes to the monsters and the villains in that movie, because it is a creepy movie for sure.
Is Wicked a Disney title?
Oh gosh, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we can claim that one.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Disney will buy it at some point.
Not yet. Yeah. So these are a few of our potential upcoming episodes that we're tossing around, but we are welcome to your suggestions. If there's something out there that you're dying to learn more about that you want us to dig into, let us know for sure. Also, what are some upcoming movies that haven't been released yet that you are excited about when it comes to either Disney or Monster or both or none of the above? What's coming up as on your radar right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, Disney. I know there's a live action Lilo and Stitch next year.
Yeah.
Truth be told, I'm not excited for that. I'll tell you why.
Okay, great.
I love the animated feature.
Yeah.
So wonderfully much. And I'm not like a Disney super junkie. So I am not a fan of all these live action remakes that they do.
I hear you. Yeah.
I just, from my maybe cynical point of view, I'm just like, that's just a cash grab with no, like, what are you offering that's new? Because when I watch the live action Lion King, well, it just makes me want to watch the animated Lion King, which is arguably much better.
I hear you. Yeah. It's just that age-old question of like, just because we can do this, should we do this? I don't know.
But what do you think? Are you excited for Lilo and Stitch?
I'm nervous about it because, I mean, Lilo and Stitch is such, it's like one of your favorite ornaments that you bring out and look at on the Christmas tree. You know what I mean? That you want to take care of. And so I'm just nervous about it. And Stitch is such a classic look of a character, and so they're altering it just a little bit, and I've seen images and I'm just like, I don't know, that's not the Stitch that I know and love. But am I being a curmudgeon? Maybe, who knows. I think it actually comes out this year. I think it comes out sooner than we think it does.
Is that right?
Yeah
I'll tell you one thing, I love Lilo and Stitch, and I love that it was not expected to do well, that it was some call it the last truly great Disney animated feature from Disney Studios.
Wow.
And I mean, the animation is gorgeous in it, but the story is so unorthodox. Like, it's a weird alien sci-fi thing.
Yes.
Like, it became like a dark horse of a movie that became a classic.
Yeah. People kind of
now,
found it later on, and it's now become like a cult classic for sure.
Right. But now with a live action, I don't know. Are you going mainstream with my Lilo and Stitch? Are you selling out?
I know. I'm nervous. I'll go see it for sure, but I'm nervous about it. I don't know. I am excited about the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie that's coming out later this year as well. I think that'll be a fun one.
Yeah. Wolverine's in the classic duds, the yellow and blue. So, that touches my nostalgia bone.
Yeah, for sure. And then what's the new Alien movie that's coming out as well? Is that coming out this year?
Yeah,
as well?
Romulus in August.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, some big titles are coming out for sure. Whether or not, they're going to be good, we'll see. We'll be sure to talk about them though. That's for sure.
But if you are excited about Lilo and Stitch, don't let me rain on your parade. Go enjoy it. Love it.
I'm sure there's one or two people out there who are really excited about it.
Yeah, and you should be.
You should be. All right. Well, what do you say, Vincent? We get into the meat and bones of our episode today and talk about our main segment, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh, man, I wish I could do a Roger Rabbit impression.
Please try. All right, Vincent, we're here at last. We made it. We're talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit today. I'm so excited to talk to you about this movie for so many reasons. But let's talk about first why we picked this as our first movie to talk about on our newish, I'm using air quotes, you can't see it right now because this is a podcast, this movie to talk about on our first episode of Magic and Monsters. What are your thoughts behind that?
Was Roger Rabbit your idea or mine?
Now I can't remember at all. I feel like it came up organically between the two of us in conversation one time, and I don't remember what the conversation was, but I remember you saying that you hadn't seen it in a very long time, right? Because you saw it early on in childhood, is that right?
Yeah. So, my personal history with the film, and I'd love to hear yours, Patrick.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I had seen Roger Rabbit. It wasn't on heavy rotation in my youth, and therefore I just kind of remember. I had always remembered bits and pieces, particularly the Judge Doom aspects.
Yes,
which have, I think, seared into the brains of any young person who's seen this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
So I hadn't given a rewatch literally until early this year, and I'm 30. I was 32 at the time, so it'd probably been over 20 years since I'd seen it. And I was watching a lot of movies with my daughter. She was born in November, and she was sleeping, and I was like, all right, let's do Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And it blew me away. Because as I said earlier, I love cartoons, I love Looney Tunes, and I love 1940s hard-boiled detective stories. So, man, this movie was made for me. I know it was, whether the creators say so or not.
Fair. I think they would agree. And I think you hit on something. I think that's why we decided to do this, because I think you texted me after or during your watch of this, and you were like, if you guys ever do Roger Rabbit, I want to come on your podcast and talk about it with you. I think that may be how it happened. And then I was like, well, what if we just talked about it together? So I think maybe Roger Rabbit was the catalyst of doing this subset podcast altogether, maybe. And so it just naturally became our first episode. I think maybe that is part of it.
That sounds right.
Sure, we'll just go with that. That's what it is from now on. That's our story. For sure. Let's see. My history with that. I remember distinctly going to see this movie at the Terrace Theater in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and absolutely loving it. So this was in its first release, obviously. Loving it, and at the same time being 100% terrified of Judge Doom and the weasels and all. It was just one of the. I think it was maybe my first foray into. Not that this is a horror movie by any stretch, but it's real scary many times in the movie, especially Judge Doom, especially at the end. It's terrifying for a kid, and it's not unscary now as an adult. It's wacky and it's wild and it's so over the top that it's sort of like is an assault to the senses sometimes, this movie. And yeah, I've always been a fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I've been wanting them to do a sequel forever, and there is one out there, but no one is jumping at the bit to do it. Apparently it's a really good script too. I haven't obviously read it, but it's out there, and it may happen at some point, maybe on Disney Plus. So who knows? But yeah, it's been in my heart for a very, very long time. It's such a unique film, and it speaks to me, I think, because I love the magic of the movies and knowing how they're done. I'm obsessed with it and digging into how did they figure this out? How did they do this? I'm such a nerd that way. And so, and this movie is just chock full of, you can go down, pardon the pun, the rabbit hole on this of figuring out the magic behind this movie. And I'm sure there's so many elements out there that we just don't even know to look into. You know what I mean? There's surface level stuff that we can it's on IMDb or it's on Wikipedia or whatever, which we hopefully will unfolds for our audiences today, but it's such a good movie, and to me it still holds up as a wonderfully done movie and visually stands the test of time for me.
Oh yeah, right. It's not just no shade on Space Jam, but as
a little shade.
Space Jam, I think, is a fair comparison. It's what everyone you think of mixing classic cartoons with actors, you're going to think Space Jam, which revisiting as an adult, you go, wow, this story is paper thin. The Looney Tunes are funny, but there's nothing beyond those gags. Right. But meanwhile, Roger Rabbit actually has a real deep character journey and, with Eddie Valiant and Roger and how they come to terms with each other.
Yeah.
And such memorable side characters. Jessica Rabbit, Baby Herman.
Oh my gosh.
Just is chef's kiss. I love all these characters. And then you get the cameos with Bugs.
So many. Yeah.
But also other classic cartoons. And we'll talk about that at the end. Who made the cut, who didn't, who was unable.
Sure.
Which rights were unavailable ultimately.
Yeah.
Various cartoon characters.
So many Easter eggs in this movie. You could watch it 1,000 times and go, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that character was in the background, just sitting there with no lines. And it's remarkable. Remarkable. So let's dig into a little bit of the history behind this movie, because it's got a real fascinating story of how it got made, why it got made, the process in which it got made, who was ultimately cast in the movie, and who ultimately got to direct the movie. It's a fascinating story. I think a lot of people don't know that Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the beginnings come from a novel in 1981, right? Called Who Censored Roger Rabbit by the author Gary Wolfe. And we have both been reading this book. I got a copy of it for you for your birthday recently. And it's an interesting book. I really implore our listeners out there, if you're readers and you are a fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, read this book. It's pretty good. It's very different from the movie, though. I'll spoil that for you.
I wouldn't even say it's close to being the same story.
Right. Yeah, it is a detective story.
Yep.
Roger Rabbit is in it.
Eddie Valiant is in it.
Jessica, Baby Herman. Some of your favorite characters are in it, but in different ways than you would expect them to be.
Completely different. And I just finished it, actually.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. I actually listened to the audiobook, which is really great because it is a film, not a film noir, but it is a noir pulpy vibe. And the reader of the book is very good. He does all the voices for all the characters.
Okay.
And his Roger Rabbit sounds like Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, interesting.
Which is great, especially when you realize that Jimmy Stewart played in a movie called Harvey. About an imaginary rabbit.
One of my favorite plays, actually, is Harvey. I love that. Too funny. And another big difference, and it's not a huge difference, I guess, but there are noticeable like references in Who Censored Roger Rabbit because it's set in the 80s, I believe, whereas Who Framed Roger Rabbit is set in the 1940s. And so the references are very different that they're able to pull from, which is, kind of fascinating when you dig into it.
Yeah. But this was a book, and Patrick, can you speak to a little bit of that early development from the screen?
Yeah. So I can't tell you exactly why, but so the book was released in 1981, and that very same year that the book was released, Disney grabbed it and said, "This is ours. We're going to make this movie somewhere, somehow." And they did. Obviously, it was released in 1988. The president of the company then of Disney, Ron Miller, he knew that Disney needed a hit, and for some reason, he read this book or heard about this book and thought, "This is going to be our juggernaut. This is going to be what's going to save Disney," because it had been a while. In both live action and in animation for Disney that they had anything really of note. It basically, Mary Poppins was maybe the last thing that did really well in theaters for Disney. And that was, 10, 15 years before this movie came out. So Disney was on the struggle bus for a while. And you can, there's many wonderful documentaries and books all about, sort of Waking Sleeping Beauty and how the Disney Renaissance came to be. And I feel like Ron Miller, kudos to you, sir, because you found the exact project that I would argue, Vincent, I don't know, and maybe you go with me on this journey, did end up kind of saving the company. It sort of resurrected animation for many different companies, not just Disney, that people fell in love with animation after Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And it was one of the biggest box office successes of all time at the time for Disney and for other companies as well.
Yep, 100%. And I think I'm fascinated by the context of the Walt Disney Studios in the 70s and 80s. And I think for my listeners especially, this is the fascinating nugget of Hollywood history. As you say, Walt Disney was really in the pits. This was before the so-called Renaissance. It started with the animated Renaissance, The Little Mermaid, through Lilo and Stitch, I would say. But, so the 90s was a big deal. But before then, not a great place for animation at Disney or elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I am fascinated by Roger Rabbit's development with how many different parties were involved.
Yeah.
So Steven Spielberg was a big player on this film. Was he a producer?
He was. He didn't jump on at first, though. So a lot of people threw their hat in the ring for this movie when development, just really early days, first started to happen. Fun fact, Robert Zemeckis wanted to direct this immediately, right away. He saw the potential in this, but Disney turned him down because this was before Robert Zemeckis was Robert Zemeckis, right? He had not yet directed Back to the Future. He hadn't done anything yet, basically. And so Disney was like, sorry about it. We want somebody bigger than you to to do this. So they did a lot of testing at first. They hired a couple of writers. They hired an animator, which his name was Daryl Van Siders, I believe. Citters. Hopefully it's Siders. I'm just going to call him Siders from now on, to head up animation, who was big at Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes at the time. So it was interesting that they kind of knew right away, because the book does involve many different characters from many different companies. And I don't know how he got around those rights, but he names them all in his book. And apparently did not get sued by anybody. And so I think Disney knew that they had to sort of collaborate somehow. So they immediately hired an animator who already knew intimately the Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes characters.
Right. Well, it was Spielberg, who I saw with Kathleen Kennedy, were executive producers on the film.
Yes.
But it was Spielberg using his clout to convince other Warner Brothers Fleischer Studios, like Woody Woodpecker, to collaborate with Disney. This had never happened before. It hasn't happened since.
No, it was a stroke of genius that they brought him on. Just a stroke of genius and good luck, I feel, as well, because he wasn't doing anything else at the time, which is weird because his studio was just getting off the ground. This was, I think, in 1985. So there's a changing of the guards at Disney, right? Michael Eisner comes on, and he has been largely known as he wants to commercialize Disney. And whether or not you agreed with that, he brought a lot of money into the company. So he knew right away, we got to get Steven Spielberg, who at the time, Kathleen Kennedy, as you said, and Frank Marshall were all three of them heading up this production company, Amblin production company. And I don't see this movie getting made without them, right? No. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. Not on the scale that it did, because they had the money, the know-how, the clout.
Right.
Like you said, because Steven Spielberg was responsible for getting all of these crazy companies to say yes to be a part of a Disney movie, even though their name wasn't going to be billed. Basically, it was going to be billed as a Disney movie. And it was, obviously. So pretty wild.
Yeah. So you saying Frank Marshall just makes me just want to say I pulled a lot of my information from the DVD audio commentary, which has producer Frank Marshall, director Robert Zemeckis, screenwriters Jeffrey Price, Peter Seaman, associate producer Steve Starkey, and visual effects artist Ken Ralston. So most of what I'm going to say is pulled from that commentary.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Very insightful.
It's really good. Definitely watch it. I think it's on Disney Plus as well. If you look at go to like the deleted scenes section, and I think there's a commentary section there too. And it's really good. Really, really good. Okay. So I guess if we zoom right along through here on the timeline. So we got Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg sort of gets all of these Warner Brothers, the Fleischer Studios, as you said, Harvey Comics, a bunch of different companies that have all of these characters that they need and want. Most of them said yes. A lot of them said no. But once they got all of these rights, because I think that they didn't know what they were going to get until they got Steven Spielberg on board, and he got them a lot of what they wanted. So they get approved for a $30 million budget with this movie, right? Which at the time, $30 million was the most expensive animated movie of all time. At the time, for comparison, E.T. was only made for $10 million. And that was an enormous movie. And so if you think about $30 million, they were like, oh, we can't do this. But it gets greenlit. They get all of these characters on board. They get all of these different companies on board. The budget starts to balloon. I can't remember the exact number. It jumped up to like $50 or $60 million after this, because they realized there's just no way they can do all this work without a larger budget. And again, thank goodness we have Michael Eisner on board, who was all in. He just said yes to everything, basically, when it came to this movie.
I don't know if it was Eisner, but
sure, yeah.
But Disney still had to be convinced along the way that it was worth the money they were investing.
Right.
So, again, from this commentary, Disney wanted at first only 12 minutes of animation, because that's where most of their money was going to be spent.
Right.
12 minutes. It ended up being 54 minutes, and then in the final cut we have 48 minutes of animation in this movie, which is,
I mean, half the movie basically. There's not a scene really that doesn't have some form of animation in it. If it even is just a cell of something, like there is animation in almost every single frame of this movie, which is crazy to think that they only they signed on for 12 minutes and they got basically the full movie.
Right. So you talk about a ballooning budget, whatever the number was.
Yeah.
You can just tell based on that it was getting out of hand. And also, we talk about these cartoon characters. not inexpensive. So we had obviously Warner Brothers owns the rights to the Looney Tunes.
Right.
Fleischer Studios, I think I said Woody Woodpecker. That's actually Universal. But a character like Betty Boop is
Betty
Fleischer
Boop.
Studios.
Yeah.
She's a real person. I'm going to refer to all these animated characters.
100%. You have to.
Yeah. Ms. Boop plays a wonderful part
Yes.
in Roger Rabbit. But, characters like Felix the Cat, which, you talk about classic animation. There's a lot of things I'm not even an expert in, but I'll see that character and I go, oh, yeah, I've seen that. Just like in the through the cultural osmosis. But, Patrick, who are some characters that they couldn't get for this movie?
So a lot, actually, I imagine. But the big ones that they really wanted to get were like Popeye and Tom and Jerry and Casper the Friendly Ghost were ones that they I think they in the original script they had parts written for these characters, but they couldn't reach an agreement with their respective companies, and so they sadly did not make the list. So some rewrites had to happen. Some different characters shifted in and out of different roles, I think, at the time. So unfortunately, they couldn't get them. I want to be a fly on the wall during those agreement negotiations so just some fun things that came out of the negotiations were like screen time for animated characters, as though they're like actors in their trailer waiting for their contracts to be approved or whatever. It's crazy. So the only reason they got big characters like Bugs Bunny or a Daffy Duck, right, is that they agreed to give them exactly the same amount of screen time as their counterpart at Disney would have. So that's why you have a lot of scenes where it's Donald Duck and Daffy Duck doing pianos, and they have the exact amount of screen time because they weren't going to get the Daffy Duck unless he got as much billing rights as Donald Duck.
Which is like,
it's crazy.
You hear this same thing with actual actors.
Yes.
Right. I don't want to do that movie if I'm getting second billing. So
right.
The lawyers do their thing.
Yeah, or if I only have 7 lines and this other actor who is getting paid the same amount as me has 8 lines, I'm not doing it. We're both going to have the same number of lines.
So I think I might love Looney Tunes as much as you love Disney.
Sure.
So yeah, Donald Duck does not get priority over Daffy. I'm sorry. Daffy is clearly the superior duck.
Yeah. We'll have a fight about that. That's fine. We'll put a pin in that one. But yeah, I mean, even like Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, I guess they decided they were the 2 biggest stars at Disney, and so they gave them the exact amount of screen time. And this flows through to even the end of the movie where Porky Pig comes out and then Tinkerbell comes out, and so you get the exact amount of screen time. That
was Eisner's touch. Actually, he was the one who said, we need Tink in this. He put Tinkerbell in there for the same reason, right? We don't want to end a Disney movie with a Warner Brothers ending.
Didn't make sense at all. No. It was great. I mean, it was just a touch of genius, I feel like. Yeah. But yeah, you see those. So if you watch the movie, look for those little partnerships that happen throughout the movie of like, oh, interesting. There's that character next to that character and they have the same amount of screen time, which is a fascinating thing.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Is there like what kind of movies can we see Mickey Mouse and his friends in? Because I feel like, so just from like an outsider's perspective,
sure,
like the Looney Tunes are everywhere. Those cartoons ran nonstop back in the day on Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
But even on the Disney Channel, I don't remember any of the Disney shorts in the classic, 30s and 40s and 50s. I'm sure Disney made Mickey Mouse shorts.
Hundreds.
Where are they?
Of them. They're on Disney Plus. You can look them up.
Are they?
There's a whole there's like a I can't remember. There's like a shorts collection or something. If you sift through them, they're not all there. I mean, some of them I think maybe are problematic a little bit, or they're just way too old to put them anywhere. But they're out there, hundreds and hundreds. Donald Duck, I think, actually has more shorts than Mickey Mouse does because they used Donald Duck in like war videos.
Yeah, they did.
So he's out there a ton. There's not a lot of when it comes to like feature length animated movies that star the classic, the Fab Five, we'll call them: Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Pluto, Daisy, if you want to do six. Goofy, yep. There's not a ton. There's like a Goofy movie, which is out there. Mickey Mouse, though, they don't like to trot him out unless it's a Mickey Mouse vehicle necessarily. And he's not really a feature-length animated character. He's in a lot of longer shorts of like The Prince and the Pauper or Mickey's Christmas Carol or Mickey and the Beanstalk. Those are some of the bigger known ones. So no, you're not going to see a lot of feature-length animated movies with those characters. They kind of preserve them for when they really want to use them, which is mostly in the parks, to be honest, nowadays.
Yeah, but I mean, and I'm just observing how interesting of a choice that is.
Yeah.
When Mickey Mouse is, along with Bugs, got to shout out my man there.
Yeah.
The most recognizable animated character across the globe.
In the world, yeah, absolutely.
I actually think Mickey Mouse is number one, Bugs is number two. But yeah, you'd think they would want to capitalize on that in terms of feature-length movies. I
don't think they need to, though. I think this is such an interesting conversation to have on a monster podcast as well. But I think I don't know this as a fact, but the way that they use Mickey Mouse is that he's sort of the boss of Disney. Like, he is actually the CEO of Disney. And so he's used for, I don't know, advertising Disney, basically. He's just the face of Disney. Mm-hmm. And so to put him in a movie, a feature-length movie, I think waters down the clout of Mickey Mouse.
You know what? We can move on, but I want to say that there is a Steamboat Willie slasher movie in the works.
Yes, there is, because the rights have passed, and so everyone grabbed onto it and said, "We're doing something crazy with Steamboat Willie." Stay tuned, everybody.
At least the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse will be in a feature-length film soon.
And it will be featured on this podcast as well.
Not a Disney movie, to be clear.
Fair.
Patrick.
Vincent.
We need to throw down and quiz each other, okay? The gloves are going to come off, the little cartoon white gloves.
Yes, we interrupt this program for a impromptu Roger Rabbit quiz, yeah?
Pop quiz. And not just Roger Rabbit.
This is true.
My quiz, the questions I'm going to ask you relate to cartoons, Disney, and Warner Brothers. Okay. And they have a monster theme to them.
Awesome. Mine are Disney specific, but related somehow to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'm super excited about this. We're trying something new, everybody. A little behind the scenes. We're trying something new. So let's see if you like it. If not, we're still gonna do it probably. All right. Who wants to go first?
Ooh, you hit me first.
Okay. Is there a prize at the end of this? No, the prize is we get to keep doing the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, just if you win, Disney is the best, and if I win, on this episode of Magic and Monsters, I am playing for Bugs Bunny.
Oh, you're okay. Yeah. It's rabbit versus rabbit, so I'm playing for Roger Rabbit, and you're playing for Bugs Bunny.
Okay, nice.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question first. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Here we go. So, Hollywood Studios in Orlando opened a year after Roger Rabbit was released, and you could argue that much of this park drew inspiration from the art direction of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, they had originally planned to have a Roger Rabbit-themed area that would have represented Toontown, much like they have in Disneyland. The idea was, of course, scrapped, but there are little Easter eggs throughout the park referencing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, one of which is a window and blinds with a cutout of Roger Rabbit replicating the scene from the movie where he jumps out of the window. Where in the park is this window located? All right. It's a multiple choice.
Okay, thank goodness. Thank Elmer Fudd. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so it's above one of these restaurants. Is it above the 50s prime time, Is it above Hollywood and Vine, or is it above the Brown Derby?
Ooh. I have walked by all those restaurants. I have to think. I'm going to say Hollywood and Vine.
You are correct. Ding, 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 ding. Well done. Well done. Yes, right in the heart, basically, of Echo Lake.
All right. Nice. It's been too long since I've been to Hollywood Studios, but
I know.
Low key, my favorite park.
It's yeah, I would have to agree with you. And I actually sent you a picture of this last time I was there a couple weeks ago.
All right. I got one for you here. So,
okay, I'm nervous.
Okay. Millicent Patrick was one of the first female animators at Disney when she was hired in 1939.
Okay.
She helped animate the Night at Bald Mountain sequence of Fantasia, released in 1940. This in and of itself was inspired by the 1925 German film Faust from 1926.
Okay.
Millicent Patrick would later distinguish herself as the designer of which famous movie monster? Is it A, the creature from the Black Lagoon,
Ooh.
B, the Wolfman, or C, the monster in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms?
What? Okay. You said, okay, can I ask you a follow-up question? Okay,
we're doing new things.
I know. Logistically, you said she would later be known as, right? So this would have happened after Night at Bald Mountain, or was this before?
After.
This was after. Really? Okay. The fact that any of these creatures were created after. I'm going to go with, based on aesthetic alone, if I'm thinking of the Night on Bald Mountain, the creature from the Black Lagoon.
You are correct.
Hey, amazing. I don't know if that's why it would have, but for some reason, those two characters look a little bit similar to me.
Yep. And Millicent Patrick, she only very recently has been getting the recognition due to her.
Wow.
The male heads of, Hollywood kind of suppressed that for many decades.
Sure.
But yeah, she's a trailblazer.
That's amazing. Amazing. All right. Well, okay. My next question for you actually kind of has to do with amazing women in animation. So here we go.
Jessica Rabbit.
Well, the nightclub that Jessica Rabbit performs in has a very special name to it. And it has to do with some very famous ladies within the Disney company. Is the name of the nightclub Club 33? Is it the Ink and Paint Club? Or is it the Adventurers Club?
Oh, wow. Small details. I'm going to say the Adventurers Club.
I can see why you would guess that, because it is an actual club within Disney, but that's not the correct answer. It is the Ink and Paint Club, which is named after the very famous Ink and Paint Department, which was established in 1932, celebrating, we celebrate them now, but they weren't celebrated quite so much then, the women who were in charge of painting all of the cells in Disney cartoons.
Millicent Patrick was one of those ladies.
I was going to say, I believe she was one of the founders of the Ink and Paint Club.
So I'll take the loss. I'll take the hit. It's fine. But I thought that you said not ink and paint, but ink and paint, as in the indigenous peoples.
Gotcha. Sorry. I will enunciate my next question a lot better for you.
So I'll find a word to mispronounce in my question for you.
Fair. Yes. Wonderful.
Okay.
Yes.
Bugs Bunny confronts a tall, hairy, orange monster named Gossamer in two shorts, Hair Raising Hair and Water Every Hair. Now my question is, what does Gossamer wear on his feet? A, platform shoes, B, tennis shoes, or C, roller skates?
Oh, wow. Okay. I can picture this character. I know exactly who you're talking about, but I can't scan down to see his feet. Oh, gosh. I feel like it's not roller skates. I feel like that's a little too wild to animate, but I'm probably wrong. I'm gonna go with tennis shoes. I feel like it's tennis shoes. I feel like it's a basic situation because he's so extravagant.
Yeah, well, it's tennis shoes. Yep.
Wow.
So you're technically winning.
Fair. That was a strong guess, though. I have to admit. Oh man! Fun fact though, I did not a fun fact. I didn't know that he even had a name. I just thought he was like the orange hairy guy or something.
Yeah, well, his name is something I always have to remind myself of, but it's Gossamer.
I like it. I wonder if the Disney version of Gossamer is Sweetums, the big huge Muppet, the big hairy Muppet.
I can see that.
The Muppet Show, although not technically a Disney character, but they own him now. Anyways. Okay. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Last question. So, as we discuss in this episode, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, of course, was not the first Disney project to use live action and animation. So, can you name the first Disney project that did use live action and animation at the same time? Was it The Shaggy Dog? Was it The Three Caballeros? Or was it Alice's Wonderland?
This is not my guess. I'm just clarifying.
Great.
Alice's Wonderland or Alice in Wonderland?
That's a very good observation. I did, in fact, say Alice's Wonderland, not Alice in Wonderland.
Mr. Ink and Paint.
Okay, you heard very, not at all what I said, but okay, fair. I'll give it to you.
You know, because I do love these characters, I'm going to say The Three Caballeros.
I'll give you a half a point for this because I believe The Three Caballeros was the first full-length animated project that used animation and live action, but it was in fact Alice's Wonderland way back in 1923, which would have been the start of the Alice comedies, which was also the same year that the Disney Brothers Studio was created, now of course known as the Walt Disney Company.
Wow.
I know.
There's some history for you.
Yeah, really and truly. So that kind of started and not saved, but it jump-started the Walt Disney Company, and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit sort of saved the Disney Company. So a nice little bookend there.
Okay, so let's recap our points here. So I have 1.5 points.
I'll give you 1 3/4 because of Incan.
Okay, I have 1 and some change.
Great.
And you have 2 points.
I do have a strong 2.
Okay, so you're just playing for fun now.
Now it's just I'm all in on this one. All the chips are on the table because I have nothing to lose.
We can keep the points going though throughout the whole Magic and Monster series. So this could not be the end, right? We'll come back and I'll take the lead next time. All right, here we go.
I believe in you.
So Warner Brothers had Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. Disney had Silly Symphonies, a series of short animated cartoons from 1929 to 1939. What is the name of the very first Silly Symphony?
Oh, gosh.
Shout, you know it. I know you know it. Is it The Graveyard Jamboree, The Skeleton Dance, or Mickey and Donald Hunt Witches in the Moonlight?
Are all 3 of these actual titles, or did you make up 2 of them?
I don't know.
It's the Skeleton Dance, right?
Yes. I did make up the other 2.
Okay, great. I was like, I don't feel like those are titles, so it's gotta be. Oh, amazing. There's actually a really interesting documentary about the making of the Skeleton Dance. I think it's on YouTube. You should go look it up.
Yeah, I definitely want to. I just think that it's really neat that Disney's first cartoon short is a horror-based, very macabre type of story.
It's pretty creepy, actually. It's actually really, macabre is a really good word for it because it's out there for Disney for sure. Oh, good stuff. All
right, great. So we'll end this final score.
Yeah,
Patrick 3.
All right,
Vincent. I'm going to say 1.5.
Great. I like it. I like your modesty there. I was going to be generous and give you 1 3/4, but 1.5 it is.
Oh, 3/4. Yep. I just can't do math. I thought that was less than 1/2.
You know what? For that, you're back. You're down to 1.5. 1.5 it is.
It's easy. Fine. Yeah, it's easier for me to remember.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Well, this was fun. Thank you for bringing this to the table, Vincent. And now, I guess, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get back on track with before we get into sort of the filming process of the movie. So in 1985, then, right? We're fast forwarding in time here a little bit. Robert Zemeckis, they don't have a director yet for the movie still. But they do have a script, and they do have all the characters are purchased, and it's going forward. Robert Zemeckis has since directed Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future, both of which were massive box office hits. And so Disney said, okay, you can come on board now. now that he has a proven track record of making money, which just makes sense. I mean, because the point of this movie is to make Disney as much money as possible, because they're flopping around right now. They don't know what's going on in the theater. So they bring on Robert Zemeckis, who has an established relationship with Steven Spielberg, thank goodness. So they're working really well together. The two of them decide to get rid of Van Siders as the director of animation, and instead they get Richard Williams, who already has a proven track record. He's an Academy Award winner at the time. He's got a few Emmys under his belt. He's their guy. However, Williams doesn't initially want to do the movie, but Disney basically gives him creative control over the animation of this movie, and they offer to move the production for him from Los Angeles to England. So the entire movie then is moved to England for this animator. And I feel like, again, without Richard Williams, this movie doesn't work at all. His know-how on how to make this animation work pays off tenfold. He adds all these really amazing touches to the movie. For example, like the creation of Roger Rabbit himself. His vision of Roger Rabbit was a combination of everyone's favorite characters. So Roger Rabbit has Droopy Dog's red swatch of hair. He's got Goofy's overalls. He's got Porky Pig's bow tie, Mickey Mouse's gloves, and Bugs Bunny's ears and cheeks. So he knew to throw all these loving and adored characters together to make a character that everyone was going to fall in love with visually. I mean, genius, I feel like. It's kind of wild. That mind is amazing to me.
Yeah, I am just looking up Richard Williams's filmography, some of the movies he's worked on.
Sure.
As maybe, actor, writer. Well, nothing's really coming up quickly, but
he knows what he's doing, I guess.
I
is
cut
the point of the
everything I just said for the past 30 seconds. Delete it.
Amazing. Another smart thing that he does, Richard Williams, he brings on an associate producer, basically. He's an up-and-comer by the name of Don Hahn, who, interestingly, has been on the GDTD podcast. But Don Hahn, thankfully, came onto this movie because after this movie, he would go on to produce a few, small films like Beauty and the Beast, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Lion King. I mean, this launched the career of Don Hahn, basically, which is pretty incredible. So a lot of things fell into place during the production casting of this movie that A, this movie doesn't get made without them, and B, a lot of other movies don't get made without them being involved in this movie.
It's true.
It's pretty
when
wild.
You think about, again, the historical context of Disney at this time.
Yeah.
It being shot in the UK saved a lot of money too. It was very cheap. It was cheaper than shooting in Hollywood. And they did their casting in the UK too. So Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant.
Sure.
He's a British actor. You would never know it because he just so perfectly embodies a Los Angeles detective.
How he didn't even get nominated for an Academy Award for playing this role is beyond me, because really and truly, this is not hyperbole. It's he's perfect in this movie, in this role. You can smell the booze coming off of him when he's on screen. You know what I mean? He just gets it. He knows what he's doing.
And it was his physical acting too that won him the part. So Hoskins is pantomiming essentially when he's by himself, because all the animation was added in later.
Yeah.
Stand-ins, maybe an actor standing in place of Roger Rabbit, the character. Mm-hmm. But it was Hoskins doing everything in a vacuum. He didn't know what this was going to look like, sound like.
Yeah.
And I think Hoskins' background is in a lot of physical theater as well, which you can see a taste of right at the end of the movie when Eddie Valiant is doing a little routine
yes,
to throw off the weasels. But you can see what a natural he is in those moments with just his pratfalls and his tumbling and his clowning, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about, so you mentioned the acting of him is amazing and him not knowing what these characters are necessarily going to look like. In the filming of this movie, there were many characters that, you're right, like Jessica Rabbit, he had no idea what she was going to look like until post-production, basically. So they just tell him, imagine the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. And it worked. Like, he is so good at what he's doing, but they realized during the filming that they have to figure out all these tricks, right, of how to film this movie, knowing that we have moving cameras, which almost never happens or has happened before in an animated / live action movie, right? So they're breaking all the rules here already. And so they have to figure out how to draw this and how are we going to keep it level. And so they do end up creating a bunch of puppets for the movie of some of these characters, like Roger Rabbit, that would stand in, that would be to scale, I think, of what it would actually be on the screen, that he can then have an eye focus on. And so you notice that his eye level is always in the correct spot because they have these puppets in place that then they later scrub out and add in the animation. It's so fascinating, the making of this movie, that you think of puppetry is involved in this animated movie.
Yeah. The nightclub scene starring Ms. Boop features a lot of penguin waiters carrying around trays of cocktails. And there's an animated octopus behind the bar.
That's my favorite.
With 8 arms, swilling drinks and making drinks, and all those were puppet stand-ins.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine. I don't know if it exists, but I'd love to see behind the scenes footage of whatever it looked like before the animation was put in.
Oh, that would be the raw footage of it would be so cool to see. Cause they have, like the octopus, for example, there were marionettes above the soundstage moving the drinks and things, and they were tied to things that the actor could then pull the drink off of the string and then carry it with them as though it was just happening in real life, that an octopus had just given her a cocktail. It's crazy. It's so good that these puppeteers need their own Academy Award as well, because it's just perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It's so wonderful.
Just so much work, and which is like a good thing. And Patrick and other creators listening to this, it's just, you just have so much respect. And Roger Rabbit is a well-made movie, but even quote unquote poorly made movies, it still takes a level of commitment and focus and resources, and everything. So much has to go right. And
much has to go right.
And with Roger Rabbit, it does. And it makes you appreciate what is possible with movie making.
Well, and this is what I love about Disney so much too, and I think this is just a through line in the history of Disney movies, and not to say that other studios don't do this as well, but Disney takes such big swings, and they aren't afraid to learn as they go. Especially like on a movie like this, they were making stuff up. They built robots. They figured out how to build a robot arm for Baby Herman to hold a cigar that they would then later animate over. To figure their team of Imagineers is so creative that without them, again, I'll be saying this 1,000 times, without them, movies like this don't get made because they're not afraid to learn as they go.
So we don't have to spend time on this tangent, but this conversation makes me think about previous movies, Disney movies that blended the live action with animation, like Mary Poppins.
Sure.
Dead Knobs and Broomsticks. It's a personal favorite of mine.
Yeah.
So tell me, you can, if you're familiar with those films, you can see that Roger Rabbit is on a different level than Mary Poppins. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, beyond. Like, Mary Poppins, you know, walked so Roger Rabbit could fly a jet, basically, you know? Like, the comparison is you can't compare them, really, because, well, again, they broke all the rules, like I said, right, with Roger Rabbit and how they did this. So if you watch Mary Poppins, yes, they have animated characters, but they're all really still shots. They're not, it's not a moving camera, and the animated characters are not interacting with live props or touching people, really. So that's part of the magic of Roger Rabbit in that this was the first time, really, you see an animated character holding an actual cigar or a glass of beer or whatever it is and having it float through the air. Even in Bedknobs and Broomsticks, they did a little bit. They pushed it a little bit further, but it's mostly the animated characters are just overlaid over a still shot. And so it's hard to do, but it's what they did with Roger Rabbit was astronomically harder to do.
Totally. Yeah. And it's readily obvious. And let me just bring up the fact that you say Disney takes such big swings. This movie is not. There's a few ways we can go with this. I was going to say this movie I would not call child friendly.
Sure.
Not rated R. I would rate this movie PG-13 for sure. Yeah. But you have characters drinking beer, babies smoking cigars.
Yeah.
One of the doormen, he's a big gorilla, animated gorilla, and he says to Eddie Valiant, "What are you, some sort of smart ass?" and Disney had reservations with swearing in a Disney movie.
Yeah.
But they left it in. And you're just like, that is such a product of the 80s.
Yeah. It is. Well, I mean, even the animation of Jessica Rabbit is not for kids.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's pretty, it's risque. I mean, it's it's like old timey, you know, adult film.
So
basically.
One of my favorite jokes in Roger Rabbit, it's a visual gag.
Yeah.
Eddie Valiant is alone in his office with Jessica, and he bends down to pick something up off the floor. And when he stands back up, his head hits Jessica Rabbit's breasts.
Sure. Yes.
Because they're so large.
Yes. Yep. They're there. Yep. They're everywhere.
So, you know, you just have some good old fashioned boob jokes.
You sure do. You sure do.
You know, wouldn't be made, certainly not in a Disney movie today.
Yeah, not on this, maybe a touchstone. Well, it was touchstone, but I mean, Disney had their name, right?
Yeah.
All over. And they had Disney, like, to have Mickey Mouse in a movie like this, you're not going to see that again. Right? I think
it makes Mickey cool. I'm like,
I mean, sure. More so Looney Tunes for sure. They'll do anything with Looney Tunes. They don't, I mean, which is great, but Mickey Mouse will never, ever again be in a movie where people are smoking and drinking beer. Right? It's just not going to happen anymore.
I don't know who said it. One of the folks on the commentary, but you know, they had to suss out like what's Mickey Mouse gonna do? What's Bugs Bunny gonna do? Because they're in that scene where they're free falling with Eddie Valiant.
Sure.
There's supposed to be some hijinks involved. But someone made the determination that, look, Mickey Mouse doesn't play cruel jokes, but Bugs Bunny does.
Exactly. Yeah. And even then, like, Mickey Mouse was sort of okay with Bugs Bunny basically trying to murder Eddie Valiant in that scene. Mickey Mouse was like, what are you going to do? It's crazy. It's crazy. And yeah, that's why this movie is so special for so many reasons. And that being one of them is that, you know, you're not going to see this again. This is never going to happen again. Not on this level.
No. Not
on this level for sure. Oh, man. Okay, so let's get into a little bit, moving on. So we talked about the filming a little bit, but where this movie really shines, right, is in the post-production, in the animation of the movie.
Yeah.
Basically, the longest process in this movie. It took 14 months. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it took.
Oh,
did it take 3 years?
3 years.
Oh, I was like, wait, is 14 months for you? I mean, I'm sure it did. Maybe longer than that. Maybe just the initial animation, and maybe it's where I got that 14 months. But suffice to say, the biggest
Yeah.
section of, of this film is that, as we said before, almost every scene has an element of animation in it. What did you mention? There's 48 minutes total of animation time.
Yeah. Well, 54 total, 48 that was ended up in the film.
There you go.
And I don't have, again, I'm just recalling the commentary, but they pulled in literally, as they said, like every animator seemingly
Everybody.
in the world. Like
Yeah.
they couldn't get enough animators to work on this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember who it was. Somebody would like walk down the halls and just say, draw faster, basically, while they're doing it. Because, I mean, you had to animate every time there's an animated character, you have to take out that slice of the film of live action, animate on top of that, and then take the next scene and animate on top of that, and then make a composite of both. The ink and paint department has to get involved. And then they send all of that to ILM because they wanted these characters to look more lifelike at the time than actual animated characters were looking currently, because they're playing against live sets and live action props and people. And so they sent it to ILM, who discovered this technique of layering lighting with the characters to give them more depth. Basically, I think they called it 2.5D for the characters, so you don't need 3D glasses to watch it, but they still look that they're popping out of the screen a little bit. So they would use shadows, highlights, and then tone mats and layer them in with the characters, which make them look like they are rounded characters and have depth in them. It's wild. And then, as we said before, because Zemeckis decided to use moving camera shots, they needed to make sure that all of the characters were level all the time, so they weren't just like bouncing all over the screen with the camera that's not necessarily a steady shot. It's moving around as a person would as well. Mm-hmm. And so the character has to move around. When you think of some of these amazing scenes where Roger Rabbit's walking down an alley, his shadow is bouncing all over the place as well. They had to animate his shadow to make it look realistic, like he's actually on the streets of LA. It's really cool. And I think my favorite part of this whole animation process is that they decided that the most difficult thing to animate in this movie, though, was Jessica Rabbit's shimmering dress in the nightclub scene.
Sure.
Because they didn't, like, how do you make an animated character on a live set shimmer and have this glittery effect to it? So they used a sandwich bag, scuffed it up with some steel wool, and shot light through it onto the animated cell to make it look like it's popping and shimmering out. Wow. Crazy. Yeah.
And one reason why this movie would never be made quite the same way is because the art of 2D animation is not the standard anymore. I mean, was The Princess and the Frog was the last Disney feature to have traditional hand-drawn animation?
Hand-drawn animation. At that level, I think, as like a full-length movie. I think they use some CGI, but the newest movie Wish, did use hand-drawn mixed with CGI.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just the amount of care, just like the amount of, again, work and attention, because I'm not well-versed enough in animation to like speak to the tools and the processes, but I just know that you have to hand draw everything and then somebody else has to hand paint everything.
Every single cell.
And now, because we're talking about analog film, you have to layer those cells on top of film stock, which is your live action. And it's just like,
and make a composite of that, and so then like film that film. Basically, it's. I can't imagine how I'm not a details person. I mean, to know me is to know that I do love process, but that would drive me absolutely insane. I think that I can't. That's not for me at all. No, farm it out. That's what I do.
Yeah, right. So Roger Rabbit, maybe the apex of this type of hand-drawn animation.
100% agree. 100% agree. Before we talk about the cast and then get into our villain, our main monster of this episode in this movie, just a fun little fact about the post-production. A phrase was coined during this movie called bumping the lamp. I don't know if did you hear about this? I don't remember if they talked about it in the
Yeah.
in the doc. So there's a scene in the movie where Roger and Eddie go into the back room of the bar, basically, of Dolores's bar, to try to get the handcuffs off, and an overhead lamp is bumped, and it starts swinging all over the place. In initial animation, they were like, "It's fine. Well, this is okay." And somebody was like, absolutely not. We are going to add the shadows and the lighting effect of that lamp swinging back and forth. So if it comes toward the camera, it's going to get brighter. If it goes away, we're going to get shadows, so on and so forth. Something that the everyday audience member is not going to know or care about necessarily. But because they did that, and because it was so painstaking, and because it was so beautiful at the end product of it, they now call bumping the lamp when they want to oomph the animation of something in a Disney movie with that audiences may not care about, but Disney cares about it. So they just say bump the lamp on this one, which is pretty cool. I think that's a fun little thing to have in their back pocket.
Because I think whether or not you notice it outright, I think intuitively, subliminally, like you do notice those things. Yeah. You can't put your finger on it, but you're like, wow, that shot looked really good.
Yeah.
It's because they did X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
And for a 2-minute scene that is not necessarily significant in the movie at all, but it looks really good.
Well, that's the shave and a haircut scene.
Yes.
Which I didn't know. So Judge Doom is looking for Roger, who is hiding behind the wall of a bar.
Yeah.
And we are told, it is revealed in the story that Toons cannot resist the tune, no pun intended, that goes da 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 da. I had no idea that had a name. It's called Shave and a Haircut 2 Bits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in that moment, Roger can't resist. He's doing all he can. Steam's coming out of his ears. And Judge Doom goes, shave and a haircut. Then Roger bursts through the wall and sings 2 Bits.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny.
You can't resist.
So good. Can't resist it. Can't resist it. Oh, love it. Love it. Okay, so the cast. I pulled out some of the main characters of the cast, and we don't have to talk about them at length necessarily. We already talked about Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant. What a treat. What a absolute treat in this movie. I love in that documentary, he said that he was so glad he did this movie because it was finally a movie his kids could watch, which I love, because he was not known for doing a kids movie at all.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. I love that. We get Joanna Cassidy as Dolores, who, what a perfect casting. She looks like she was born in the 1940s in this movie and behaves like she just fits in so well. Such a good actor. We get Charles Fleischer as Roger Rabbit, who also voiced Benny the Cab, who also voiced Greasy and Psycho, 2 of the weasels in the movie. So a lot of heavy lifting on Charles Fleischer's part.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. A fun fact about Charles Fleischer is that he, and a lot of people gave him some crap for this, but I would argue that it probably bettered the movie. He would be on set on days that Eddie Valiant, Bob Hoskins, was filming with Roger Rabbit, and he would insist on wearing a Roger Rabbit costume on the side of the set and voicing the character for Bob Hoskins to react to. So Bob sort of knew what the character was going to look like, and he knew what he was acting against. And so they were kind of scene partners, even though he wasn't even on the set. And sometimes it sounds like if the audio was good enough, they would use that audio instead of having him go into the studio to do it. So, I mean, I'm sure it saved them a little bit of time and money, but a problem persisted where he would sometimes ad-lib some lines for Roger Rabbit. And so the animators had to go, well, that's not what we animated. So we have to do something completely different now because he said a different line in what they used for this scene. So caused some problems, but I mean, everything was for the better, I guess, on this one.
I did read that retakes with this film weren't possible because of the nature of their post-production. Mm-hmm. All the animation came after. So they had to work with literally what they had.
Yep. What the studio gave them, they were like, okay, here's what we got. No backseas on this one. Pretty crazy.
Boy.
Pretty crazy. Okay, so moving on, we have then Stubby K, an old vaudeville actor playing Marvin Acme. Kathleen Turner as Jessica Rabbit, who to this day is still uncredited as the role of Jessica Rabbit, but iconic character. And then we have Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom. Dun, dun, dun.
Boy, Christopher Lloyd from Robert Zemeckis' Back to the Future. He plays Doc Brown, obviously. He brings such menace to this role. And I read that it was a choice to not blink as a character. I didn't notice that but this is maybe an example of bumping the light where nobody would notice or care if he blinked. But he's, as an actor, said, no, the choice is made. I'm not going to blink. Toons wouldn't blink. Because that's the big reveal that Judge Doom is actually a toon.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, it adds a lot to the character.
100%. Yeah, it definitely makes him a lot creepier than was necessary, maybe, for this role. Okay, so I mean, this is your wheelhouse. How does Judge Doom stack up for you on a villain and or a monster character for a movie?
Well, Judge Doom as a monster, quote unquote, is so villainous, so again full of menace, and he cuts such a imposing figure too. He's tall, he's beady-eyed, he's like a vulture, and they intentionally animated him. They didn't animate him, but the makeup, I think they did did they elongate his nose with makeup? Or if they didn't, that was an idea at one point.
I can't remember now. I'd have to go back and really look at it. But I mean, they do eventually animate features of him at the end of the movie, obviously. But yeah. Right.
And then at the end, when he reveals his toon self. He has these blazing red eyes, just hellfire.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I do think I feel like they shot him at an angle that made him look more tall. Or I mean, Christopher Lloyd's already kind of a tall person, but to make him look more menacing, that he would be like sort of looming over everybody at all times, which is really cool.
So Judge Doom is clearly a villainous monster, and I'd like to talk about what were the creators doing with this character. Is he a sympathetic monster, or is he all evil? But I think in general, the toons of this world strike me. I mean, they are strange beasts in this world for sure. I mean, I'm not going to call them monsters per se, but they are not human. And I think one layer to Who Framed Roger Rabbit is how human beings and toons coexist.
Yeah.
And there's a clear hierarchy, and it's not a reach to read into a segregation going on here that mirrors real world social politics, especially in the 1940s. So that's one of the most fascinating parts about this movie as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I feel like we could peel that onion for a long time, and we simply don't have the time to really get into all of that. But yeah, there is an interesting parallel of segregation a little bit, that the toons are sort of othered from the humans, that they are treated as they're just the entertainment there and or nightclub workers, but they can't actually go to the clubs that they work at, basically. And so there's definitely a parallel there.
And they have their own section of town. Their own ghetto, if you will.
Yeah.
Toontown. Yeah. Which when Eddie goes into Toontown, he's just surrounded by chaos, because what would a city look like completely run by loony characters? Right. It's just a madhouse.
Yeah.
But they are still separate from the rest of LA.
Yeah. Very much that. And then when you learn that Judge Doom, who has been erasing toons this entire time during the movie, is also a toon, it adds this whole layer of like, oh man, this is the stuff of nightmares here. There's a guy who's basically fully getting rid of major characters in animation history, basically is his goal, where he actually is a toon himself, but he has to disguise himself as a human for anyone to take him seriously or give him any power in the world, because he actually is sort of the the judge of the entire city of LA and Toontown, basically. So it's a big package to unravel this whole character.
And the book goes into it a little bit too.
Yeah.
With they're called humanoid toons, like Jessica Rabbit. And they are able to, quote, ass as humans, which when you apply it to, race and
absolutely, yeah,
and other minorities, and who are you in a certain given situation, code switching, if you will.
Yeah.
And you just think, like in the book, it's Jessica Rabbit. What does she have to do to be successful in the movie? It's Judge Doom. Like maybe that's where he can be a little sympathetic, because as evil as he is, what in his life, in society, systemically, has caused him to make these choices. Interesting.
I like you're getting to the psyche of Judge Doom. I like this.
But he's also
not wrong, though. Yeah.
But he's also a monster.
Yeah.
In your notes, Patrick, you mentioned something about Nazi allegories.
Yeah.
And it's just he's turning on his own people. The Toons, liquidating them. Very. I think it is. But I think you could read Nazi impressions there, especially in Doom's wardrobe. He wears all black. It's very in a trench coat, very SS Gestapo.
Yeah. And I don't know that we can necessarily like make a comparison of the Toons and what happened in Nazi Germany, but there's definitely an influence happening there with specifically this character of Judge Doom. In fact, so much that like Dip, which is what the like turpentine basically gets rid of animation, was originally going to be called The Final Solution, which is pretty dark, which is very, very dark. Yeah. I almost feel gross saying that out loud, but I mean, it's out there. That's what they were.
That would be a bit much.
A bit much, but there are definitely influences of sort of the Gestapo within Judge Doom himself, which is a pretty wild, a pretty bold swing for a movie like Who Framed Roger Rabbit to have something that dark and insidious inside of it.
It's a good word, insidious.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's smart sometimes. Yeah. So I guess my question to you then is like overall, like, is this a monster in or how does this compare to other monsters in other monster movies for this character? Obviously, not all monsters are villains, and not all villains are monsters.
Right.
But here we have a villain who is monstrous at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I think Judge Doom is memorable for a reason. I think Judge Doom, certainly in the Disney Rogues Gallery, is among, I mean, I'd put him up with Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Just this wild, devilish character.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, like Roger Rabbit, I totally, obviously, am including it under the Camp Kaiju umbrella.
Yeah.
I will admit, though, and definitions of what kaiju mean and what strange beast mean, I clearly take a lot of liberties with that definition.
Sure.
And in the rules I have made for myself, there's a difference between a monster movie and monsters in a fantasy movie. Roger Rabbit does strike me as a bit more of a fantasy movie. Maybe along the lines of, other fantasy movies, right? Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. Like, there are monsters in those movies. I'm not going to talk about those on Camp Kaiju because those monsters are more accepted in the worlds in which they take place.
Interesting. Okay, got you.
Yeah. So are the Toons in this movie. It's just like, Toons aren't strange. They just they are what they are. But Judge Doom takes it to another level. He is a strange Toon. He breaks the mold. He is a human until he's not.
Yeah.
And that is pretty out there. And I would call him a legitimate monster, if you will.
I like that. He's sort of otherworldly in both worlds of humans and Toons.
Exactly.
Interesting. I like that. And he's on many lists. I know that, again, villains aren't monsters and monsters aren't villains, but they do sometimes slam into each other. On many lists of one of the scariest characters in cinematic history, not just, not just for a Disney movie. Like, he's a scary mamma jamma,
Yeah, I hadn't seen this movie for over 20 years, and I still recalled the image of him with his eyes. Oh my God. And when he gets run over by the steamroller.
And then inflates himself again. And it's crazy.
It's horrifying.
It's something that a 7-year-old shouldn't be looking at.
He's being crushed so realistically.
Yeah.
His bones are crunching and he's screaming.
Yeah.
And this is when he animates himself. He like picks himself up off the floor. He suddenly becomes a 2D character.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nightmare fuel.
Yeah, his eyeballs pop out. It's crazy. It's not good.
No.
But it's wonderful though. But it's also wonderful. Amazing. All right. So clearly we're big fans of this movie. Like, we are going on and on and on, longer than we probably should, for our listeners have stopped listening to us by now. But we're not alone in loving this movie. As we said, it was released on June 22nd, 1988. It grossed $11 million in its opening weekend. It was first place in the box office. And at the time, as I think we said it earlier on, it was Disney's biggest opening weekend ever in history of Disney. Biggest opening weekend. It would eventually go on to gross $351 million worldwide, which made it at the time the 20th highest grossing film of all time. I mean, these are amazing numbers. So suffice to say, they gambled and it paid off for them because it brought in so much revenue, so much fandom of Disney. People who weren't fans of Disney were watching this movie, and brought them into the Disney fold, which is pretty great. It then went on to win Academy Awards for Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Visual Effects Editing, and then a Special Achievement Award for Richard Williams, the animation director. So success, major success. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I would say. Yeah,
100%. And the fact that it's never been remade, that it doesn't have a sequel, that nothing... Again, like, what has come since? Space Jam, Looney Tunes back in action.
Yeah.
And what was the one you had mentioned?
Cool World.
Cool World.
Yeah.
Didn't even know that existed.
Look it up. Give it a watch. Maybe enjoy a gummy of some kind. Your choice on that one. And look at it. It's not a great movie.
But none of those movies are great. Objectively.
100%. No, and didn't do what Who Framed Roger Rabbit did. And, again, we're not saying that Who Framed Roger Rabbit was the first one to mix animation and live action. There were many, many before it. Like you said, Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Anchors Away. But they changed the game for how this worked.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, I mean, any final thoughts on Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Do you feel like...
Well, yeah.
Now that we have a podcast that's Disney and monsters, like, does this fit into one category better than the other, or is it a nice mix, or what do you think?
I think this one's a nice mix, actually, because I would say it's more of a Disney movie than a monster movie, but this doesn't even feel like a Disney movie.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
Doesn't.
Yeah.
It feels like its own beautiful little unicorn of a film. And what we ask on Camp Kaiju is, does this stand the test of time? So for Gaze Do the D listeners, for all you Tweedles out there, you're gonna get the Camp Kaiju treatment here.
I love it.
On each episode, we don't give us rating at 5 stars out of 10 or whatever. No, we'd like to just ask: does it stand the test of time? Is it worth watching in your spare time? And we have 4 different ratings here. So. Our lowest rating is, it's not worth revisiting. It definitely does not stand the test of time. Moving on, we have, it may be historically significant or just fun, but it doesn't stand the test of time. We have, there may be some antiquated moments, but overall it's great, and it does stand the test of time. And finally, we have, it is a timeless classic. Nothing wrong with it. It stands the test of time.
Yeah. Okay.
How do you feel about it?
100% stands the test of time, and will and I think will stand the test of time for years to come. I mean, I have to believe that there are people out there making movies today who go back to Who Framed Roger Rabbit as a reference of what to do. Do you know?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, story-wise, character-wise, script-wise, cast, production, everything involved, I think, top-notch. Still, I watched this movie, revisited again this morning, in fact, just in preparation, and it blows you away. It's so good, and it's so visually appealing, and I still have questions about how they did some stuff in the movie. So, yeah.
I agree. It's a timeless classic. It stands the test of time. The animation is exquisite. The performances, everyone buys into it, and Robert Zemeckis does some really nice work as a director on this film. There's one shot which I loved in the moment. Then reading in hindsight, I was like, yeah, I appreciate that. There's like a tracking shot of Eddie Valiant in his office, and the camera moves over miscellaneous objects on Eddie's desk. And this is when we get, like, through the visual medium of film, we understand Eddie's backstory. There's newspaper clippings about how his brother, who was his partner detective, was killed by a tune. Mm-hmm. So this is a hang up Eddie's working through over the course of the movie, why he doesn't trust tunes, why he doesn't trust Roger Rabbit. And it's just like touches like that Zemeckis brings to the film.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I love that.
It offers something for, if you love film, like the history of film, filmmaking, film studies, this movie offers you so much to chew on.
Definitely. Well said. Well said. Yeah. Just to recap one little thing that you said in there, I love that you pulled that out, that Zemeckis' direction. He has these high highs, and then he quiets the film down ever so slightly every once in a while. Even if it's a cartoon character doing something really subtle and quiet and lovely, it's the stillness that then allows you to go to Toontown, basically.
Right. You know? If this movie, and I haven't seen the latest Space Jam with LeBron James, but a critique I was reading was that it was so high octane the whole time.
It starts and ends at 100. Like it just keeps going.
And it just people were just turned off by the excessive noise of the movie. But Roger Rabbit doesn't do that. Zemeckis doesn't do that. He knows how to play with levels.
Yeah.
And he allows you to breathe. And it's really nice.
It is. It's great. It's great. All right. Well, we have a winner. I love that we did this for our first episode, a movie that we both really appreciate for many different reasons, and a movie I hope that our listeners appreciate as well. But if not, that's fine too. But let us know. Let us know your thoughts on this movie. Did you love it? What were your thoughts on it? What's your history with it? Does it stand the test of time for you as well, to take a page out of Camp Kaiju's book? How can they get a hold, if they want to reach out to your podcast to give some feedback? How do they do that, Vincent?
All right. So I'm going to answer that question. Then I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Great.
Okay. So follow Camp Kaiju Monster Movie Podcast wherever you podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, not X, not TikTok, but pretty much everywhere else. Go ahead. You can just leave us a comment. I will find it. You can email us, campkaiju@gmail.com. I'm really good at getting back to you. If you don't like anything that me and Patrick are doing here, let us know. Mm-hmm. Nothing is set in stone. And again, I just love talking about movies with anybody. So reach out. Let us know what you'd like us to cover on Magic and Monsters. Mm-hmm. And stay tuned on Camp Kaiju. Our next episode will be Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire. So that'll be 2 weeks from today. Patrick, you're on that episode. We can't get enough of you.
I am? Oh, yeah, I am. I guess.
Oh, my God.
I'm just kidding. I didn't sign any release forms for that, but I don't know about that. Okay.
Okay, so what's coming up on Gaze Do the D, and where can Camp Kaiju listeners find more information about you?
Great question. So all of the same platforms, just look up Gaze Do the D and you will find us on wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can find us on Instagram at GDTD Podcast, where we are we have a lot of posts on there and stories, and so feel free to comment on anything there and slide into our DMs if you have questions for us or you have feedback for this episode on our side of it. Or you can find us on email at info@gazetothed.com. info@gazetothed.com. Send us an email, send us a voice memo, whatever you have for us. What's coming up next? Who can say? Because we don't really know when this episode's going to drop, but so who's to know? Another episode. We come up bi-weekly, so look for us every other week. We usually drop them on Sundays at 6 p.m. every other week.
All right, cool. And then what's up next on Magic and Monsters?
Who can say?
We don't know, but it will be Halloween themed, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can think of a few. I mean, Hocus Pocus, Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. There's lots out there.
Frankenweenie. I don't know.
Frankenweenie, even Watcher in the Woods. Who knows? It's a scary movie.
So we'll put our heads together and we will look out for listener feedback as well.
Yes. Please let us know. Thanks for listening, everybody. We really appreciate all of you, the patrons on both sides of our Patreon worlds. We love you. Thank you for supporting us. We have a few crossover Patreon members, I believe, so that's amazing to know.
And let me just shout out, sorry, Jason, Chris, Sean, our anonymous patron, and Peggy for your support. Magic and Monsters is completely 100% because of your support. I have bandwidth to do other fun side projects like this with Patrick.
Yes, and same for all of our lovely Patreon members over at Gaze to the D. We love and support you, and thank you for supporting us.
Yeah. All right.
Well, with that, we'll see you next time, everybody. I don't know. Insert cute tagline here. We don't really have one yet. Maybe send us one. Send us one, listeners.
Just do the work for us.
Yes, please. We're tired.
All right.
Bye, everybody.